Hey, Mighty Vikings, welcome back. I want to do an interesting one this evening, specifically about comic book collecting. Now, those of you who watch the channel know that I have a whole subset of videos where I go through all kinds of collectibles in terms of comic books, what I really like about them, what I like about the hobby, etc. And so if you're watching this, you're probably into the hobby as well. It's something I grew up with, a little bit about the background. I started going to San Diego Comic Con when I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. It was a much different experience then. You would get dropped off at the Comic Con with $15 or $20 that your dad would hand you, and you would walk right in. You'd pay your entrance fee of maybe $10 at the time, and you'd have 10 more dollars to spend on some comics, and you basically walk away with huge amounts of free stuff. There was like every booth at that time gave out tons of free posters, and there were free comics, free posters, etc. And then you'd go try to get your favorite artist like Rob Liefeld or Todd McFarlane to sign your books. That was the big thrill. Or Jim Lee. It was big Jim Lee, Will Spertasio, Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee were the big ones, and then sometimes Todd McFarlane, I think, would show up. But anyway, what I want to talk about in this video is some critical information about how to collect comic books the right way. And what I want to talk about is that the big number one takeaway is that most comics are worth nothing or a dollar. So there's famously dollar bins at comic shops where they're just selling comics for a dollar. And I would say probably the majority of comic books that are ever made are worth about a dollar or two or three, something like that. So for me, you really have to focus on what they call are the keys. And I found a really great blog here I wanted to go through. It's called The Collector Guy. I want to give him a shout out, but he talks about talks right here about what are key comics and why are they worth more. So let's just kind of dive into it and do an overview real quick. So basically he talks about, what exactly is a key comic. So a key comic is an issue that holds significant importance in the comic book world. This importance is usually tied to the introduction of a major character, a pivotal storyline, or a significant event that impacts the broader comic universe. Key comics are highly sought after by collectors and enthusiasts because they represent milestones within the comic industry. So I would also add to that so not only are there pivotal storylines and significant events and introductions of characters, so first appearances, if the character becomes popular, are huge. That's probably the biggest key you can think of. Think of first appearance of Spider-Man, worth in really good condition, $100,000. Think of first appearance of Wolverine in the Incredible Hulk 181. It was actually 180. There was a cameo, full appearance of him in the back of the last page. But anyway, 181 is considered the first appearance of Wolverine. And there you're talking about mid-grade 2000, probably up to tens of thousands for a high grade. So those are key books right there. The other one I would add are keys that have a specific artist. So some artists are very popular. Neil Adams, Kirby, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee. There's some artists that are really sought after for their work. So those can be keys as well. But the focus of the keys is important because the keys are what you're going to want to focus on if you want your collection to have value in the future. If you don't care and you just collect stuff that you like, which is actually worth it. I am a big fan and a big proponent of anyone who does collecting to basically at the end of the day focus on what you like. I would say if you don't like it, but it's a key, I would say don't buy it. Because the collecting is an art form, and I do look at these as works of art. And you can display them like I typically have in a lot of my videos where I'll have a comic displayed. But anyway, that is critical that you really enjoy the piece of literature and the piece of art. And the cool thing about comics, they can be displayed pretty easily and pretty well. Some people put them on the wall, which looks really awesome. I like when they're graded and they're in the slabs and you can mount them on something or put them along the wall or whatever. I think it's really cool. So he does go into it. First appearances, we mentioned that. So, obviously, you have something like Amazing Fantasy number 15. First appearance of Spider-Man, huge book. You have things like origin stories. So, Batman Year One is a good example. Major events. So, Death of Superman and Superman number 75. That's a key book. The only problem, though, so the second part of this with collecting, you have to remember, is that collecting anything, just like all things financial, go by the rules and the economic laws of supply and demand, right? So the common rule and law of supply and demand in economics has to do with everything that we buy in a marketplace and collect. So, for example, this is the draw that people have to Bitcoin, because the supply will always be constrained. There's only going to be so many of them. At some point, it's going to stop. There'll be no more made. So there's an idea that the supply will be constrained, and because of that constraint in supply, and then the use and demand of it, as long as demand stays up, then you're going to have a high value over time. So similar with comic books. So Death of Superman is an example of one that was overprinted. So there are a lot of books in the 90s, they were kind of billed as collectibles and they were overprinted is the problem. Okay, so cameo appearances. When a character makes a brief or early appearances is actually what I mentioned. Incredible Hulk 180 is a key because there's a brief appearance of Wolverine. It's actually the first appearance of Wolverine. This is a hotly debated thing at times, but 181 is considered full first appearance. Okay, so he says, why are keys worth more? So scarcity, we talked about that, supply and demand. Does it have historical significance? There has to be demand. So demand is typically driven up by pop culture. So demand goes up when there is typically a pop cultural movie. So the great example of that right now is Deadpool. So New Mutants 98 obviously has high demand because Deadpool is so very popular right now. Now, as the popularity wanes, which is possible, you never know if these characters will be as popular in a decade. They might be, but over time, characters go in and out of fashion. So we'll see. I've got an example of one here. I've got the first Mandalorian right there, which is very cool. This is the Stephanie Hans cover, which I think is very cool. I like how you can see little baby Grogu there. Anyway, first appearance of Mandalorian in comics, and there's talk of another Mandalorian series coming up, so that's going to basically increase the demand. So, all right, so those are kind of the big things right there. You have to consider all these factors if you want to be a serious collector. If you don't care about the monetary aspect of it, then that's fine. It doesn't really matter. What I would say is collect what you like. That's all that matters to you, is you're collecting things that you enjoy. And there's such a beauty in that, for collecting. Just collect stuff you like. You're not thinking about like, oh, is it worth this much? And is it going to go up or down? Whatever. Okay, so there is something kind of interesting I found too. I looked up, so comic book market right here. I'm going to close this one. Which eras? Okay, so utilizing the Go Collect CPI index. There's now, I was trying to see if there's an actual CPI index, that consumer price index that tracks comics, and it does, and it tracks comic eras. And so it's called Go Collect's Collectible Price Index. It's kind of cool. And it talks about how the comics are broken up in different ages or eras. And I don't have the exact years here, but like the modern age, I think is typically something like 1988 to now or something like that. 1989 to now, 1990 to now, maybe something like that. Actually, I take that back. I'm sorry. The modern age, okay, comic ages. Okay, I'm going to look it up instead of just making this up, and I don't want to give you guys bad information. So comic book ages. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the modern age is, I was actually kind of right. Modern age is 1986 until today. The Bronze Age was the 70s to 1986. The Silver Age was 56 to the early 70s, and the Golden Age is 1938. So like something like the first appearance of Superman from the Golden Age, right? So Now, this is interesting because the economic forces do play here, because in the golden age of comics, they were not considered collectibles by, I'd say, 99% of people. So some people collected them and really cherished them, but I think most people saw them as things you threw away. And so a lot of these early books are very, very rare. And I think the same thing for the Silver Age from 56 to the 70s. I don't think it was till the Bronze Age that people were like, oh, these could have value and could really go up in value. Probably a lot with Hollywood and that kind of stuff. So anyway, you can see the Golden Age for the last 10 years went up 72%. The Silver Age comics went up 156%. The Bronze Age, 230%. The Copper Age, 151%. And the Modern Age, 132%. From the last 5 years, you saw the Golden Age up 32%. So these are actually some pretty eye-watering numbers. These are really high in the last 5 years. Now, the last year did see a dip. Golden Age kind of always goes up because they're so rare, and that's kind of for high rollers. But Silver Age dropped almost 9%. Bronze Age almost 9% down. Copper Age minus 17. Modern minus 16. Modern probably went down more because there's probably more supply. So anyway, just thought that was all kind of interesting. And hey, please, leave me a comment down below about what comics you would invest in, or what is your comic collecting style. Is it just collecting for the fun of it and you enjoy the art and the story and the characters, you relate to them? Or are you actually thinking about this of something where you want the books to go up in value over time, and you would like to hold on to them for a while, have them appreciate, and then someday maybe sell them for more money than you bought them for? I'd like to know. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.